Welcome, everyone, to episode 3 of the Bunker Talk. I have my guest here, David Bennett. Thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate you coming in.
Great to be with you.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think we're going to have some fun. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, and a little bit of your backstory.
Sure. Well, probably the most interesting thing is I'm a native Floridian. There's not
Same.
many of us down here, are there? We're
That's
a rare
amazing.
breed.
Yes.
I think most of Florida is imported.
Yeah.
So
My mom is too. Born here, never left.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very, very nice. So born and raised, married 28 years ago and moved 3 blocks away. So I have literally been right here in Hollywood is where I'm from. I literally grew up in the IT industry, started when I was 12 years old. At my business. My dad owned the company at the time. First client when I was 15, and now I run the business. And absolutely love what we do. So what we do is we're the IT department for our clients, and that's how we operate.
Okay. So it's like a fractional, basically, like someone can hire you that way.
Yeah, they hire us on a salary.
Okay.
And we handle all of their IT needs. So typically we're working for folks who are, 8, 9, 10 users and larger. The sweet spot, I would say, is by the time a person reaches 20 users in size, they usually realize I've outgrown my IT guy, which is what most people would have as an IT guy, and they're looking for something more, and we are that more. We're an enterprise IT department for small business. Okay.
Tell me a little bit about how did COVID go with the transition of the businesses going frantically sending everyone home? How was that?
It's interesting. I was actually shocked when I talked to some of my peers in the industry, and 6-8 months after the go home order of March, I think it was, they were still working and hustling hard to get customers set up. Meaning there had never been a process in place for setting up working from home. And for us, all of our clients just went home. We already had documentation in place.
Right. You had a plan.
So all people needed at the most was additional licensing to accommodate their workforce going home. They might have had it, licensed out for 5 or 10, and now it was 50.
Sure.
Which is
it's easy.
An hour or two to get licensing, and everyone was okay. So we had no work. When people transitioned, we were helping people with their home environments.
Right.
Figuring out how to maybe get a second monitor on their desk at home because they weren't used to doing something like that, those sorts of things. There was no big peak and there was no headache for our clients.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And, we used to own an agency. We sold it in 2018. And honestly, when everything happened with COVID, we were just like, we were not set up. If that would have hit us, we were one of those people that would have been panicking. We were not set up to just send everyone home overnight. It would have...
And I think that's true for most people. They're not set up for something that's major like that. What I think has to happen is somebody has to have a responsibility to plan for those what ifs. I'll give you another example of something. This is not typical, right? I had a call that occurred on a Saturday. This was about 19, I think it was, August of 2019, and about 11:30 in the morning. And my client gave me a call and said, hey, take a look at your phone. I just sent you a picture. I'm looking at it going, I can't tell what this is. It looks like black mess. And he says, yeah, that's the computer room. It burned down last night. Now, that's not something you typically plan for.
No.
But we should.
Absolutely.
Because how is that any different from a hurricane ripped off the roof of the building? And a hurricane, we have that risk every year. Right?
Yeah.
So,
and how many businesses are not prepared?
And they're not prepared.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it, we go, this is a typical small business problem of lack of planning. And so in our case, when it comes to the areas of our responsibility, we plan for our clients. I don't expect my clients to have an answer for what are they going to do if there's a fire. His answer was I called Dave, right? And I think we were that was 11:30. At 12:30, I had 2 guys at my office, and by 5:30 they had a server, 6 workstations, 2 Wi-Fi access points, and a switch on a cart ready to go with all of his data restored. And he's like, "How did you do it that fast?" I'm like, because we're always prepared.
That's what you do
for a crisis. It doesn't. We don't want a crisis. Oftentimes preparation helps you avoid the crisis.
Right.
Planning ahead of time. It's not that your plan is executed. planning ahead of time allows you to be prepared to react properly when something does happen. So, we don't plan for a fire. We don't have a business plan for how do you deal with a fire. You have a plan for how you deal with some disaster. It's called a disaster recovery plan. And it could be fairly straightforward and simple, a couple of pages, but the key is you've done some planning work around it. So now you have some what ifs. Well, when a pandemic comes, how is that much different from how will we continue operating if the roof got ripped off the building from a hurricane? Is there really much difference? I mean, actually, a roof getting ripped off is much more difficult because you could have lost something.
Right.
A pandemic just says you closed your doors. So that's actually easy, should have been easy to deal with. But people don't stop to think about things like, well, how am I going to get computers for those people at home if they don't have computers? Maybe what we should be doing on our next buying cycle is buying laptops instead of desktops so we can take them home. You had the luxury of starting a new, selling the one agency, and starting up a new one. That gives you a blank slate. So now you can take lessons learned. Absolutely. What do you do if you're a 20-year-old business, right? You may not be able to do that, but you should still be going through that process.
Right. I'm glad you said that because I think that your industry, I think people definitely value your industry more than ours, but I think that what you do is so important and people really like to nickel and dime when it comes to like IT services, right? Can you tell me what a business owner should think about? Like, what are the things that they should look for? Because I know that even for myself, the person that like installs my Microsoft Office, right? Like they don't do any cybersecurity for me. And I think that a lot of business owners believe, well, the guy that fixes my printer or the lady that fixes my printer they're also doing security.
They do everything.
And that is not the case. It's actually very far from the truth.
Right.
So educate me as a business owner, and the people that are watching on what are the key questions to ask when looking for an IT cybersecurity partner.
Good. Let me set the stage. It's a good question that you asked. Let me set the stage because you said something at the beginning that I understand where you're coming from, but I think you're actually wrong. You made the statement, I think people value your business, Dave, more than they do mine. That is a common belief that all of us have.
Right.
I think people value your business more than they do mine.
Nowadays, I don't hear it a lot. So
I think people value the doctor more than they value mine. They value my whatever it might be. That's a point of view that we have. When we look at it, let me put this into context. If you want to build a home, are you going to call your handyman?
No, absolutely not.
You would call him to replace the toilet because it's leaking the seal. You might call him to patch the drywall on the wall. But even that might start getting hard, right? Hey, re-slick my ceiling. Is he really the right guy or do you need a drywall specialist?
Sure.
Right, I probably need a drywall specialist. So at what point are you going to go ahead and say, well, I'm going to go ahead and design the home. That's an architect. I'm going to go home. I'm going to go ahead and put all the contractors together as a general contractor. I'm going to bring in all the specific trades, electrical, flooring, the building, the concrete guys and all that stuff. Pretty soon you're an expert in all these different things. Are you capable of doing that?
Right.
Most of us would have to honestly say either no, I'm not capable. More realistically, even if I could be, I don't have the experience, so I'm going to have all kinds of lessons learned. How many of these times I'm going to have to do this to become skilled enough to do it? And so ultimately what ends up happening, we say, no, I value your experience in insurance because you've got years. You've grown up in this business. You and your dad have owned multiple agencies. How much experience do you have dealing with something that I never would? So why would I go online and try to do the same thing myself rather than leverage your experience? And so there's going to be two types of people, right?
Sure.
You're going to have the people who will say, it's a commodity and I can buy it anywhere. That's not your client.
Right.
That's not mine.
No.
And probably for anyone who's listening, who's in a service business, that's not their client either.
No.
That would be a Walmart transaction. By the way, Walmart, if you go there, they really have no service personnel.
Right.
It's a warehouse to stock shelves. There's a place for it. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's people who want a transactional experience. I want to be able to go through, swipe my card and get something. And if I need service or I need help, well, that's not the place to get it.
I think that people, they pay for their insurances and then it's a thing of like, I've paid it for 20 years and I've never used it. Right. And I feel like, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but before, cybersecurity, maybe in your world, it was always a thing, but like as a business owner before, it wasn't something that was so heavily focused on.
Not at all.
We had a firewall, we had, antivirus on our computers, and that's it. And we paid the guy to come fix our printer.
Right.
But the cost to a business of now what needs to be done has increased substantially. And I think that it's one of these things where it's like, well, I have to pay it, but I'm never going to get hacked. I'm not Target. Right?
Yes, and it's a wrong belief.
It's 100% wrong, just like the insurance.
Wrong,
like
right.
I have to pay it and I never use it, which is the position that a lot of people do with cyber insurance.
And so if you think about it, take a look at insurance, right? What is the purpose? For me as a business owner, what's the purpose of insurance? It's not to solve a structural property insurance. It's not to solve a structural problem in my building. It's not to pay for damages when someone slips and falls because I didn't bother paying to fix stairs. No, it's
right.
for catastrophic risk,
yes.
right? And so the idea behind insurance is it allows me to take this enormous risk that I could have, which could crush my business.
Put you out of business.
And it takes it off my balance sheet. So it gives me a way to pay for something
right.
to move that
transfer
risk,
of risk, right?
Whenever anyone is hiring a service provider, whether it's insurance, whether it's IT, or any of your listeners and their service that they're doing, what you're doing is you're paying for someone to take ownership of something far better than I could do myself. Mm-hmm. So in the IT sphere, what you're asking about right now is cybersecurity and what is it that we need to be aware of. The issue is we've always needed to be aware of it. We just haven't been. It hasn't hit our collective conscious, but it has in the enterprise world. Mm-hmm. In the government and the enterprise world, that's been there strong since the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. So why are we so slow to catch up? Well, there's two reasons. Number one, a lot of it is expensive,
right?
Out of reach. So if it's out of reach, it doesn't matter. If I can't afford it, then why should I worry about it? That's the first reality. Today, it's not out of reach.
Right.
Because it's not out of reach, there's something else that's happening. And most of us are seeing it from you guys, thankfully, thanks. But the insurance companies that are, if I want to go get cyber liability insurance, the questionnaires that you used to hand me, 4 years ago might have had 4 questions on them. Now it's 4 pages of questions.
Very difficult questions that the average business owner will not understand.
Forget average business owner.
Right.
Most IT professionals don't know what many of the acronyms are. Yep. They'll see SASE and all these different things and like, I don't know what these things are.
And I think that that's kind of the problem. And that's why a lot of IT people that I have actually encountered myself kind of push back on having their clients even go down that route because it exposes that they don't know.
It exposes them. That they're really handymen.
Exactly.
Of the IT world.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
And they're not the general contractor that you would bring in, a Lennar homes builder who knows what they're doing and understands what's going on. It's Jack the handyman. And there's nothing wrong with Jack the handyman who can hang up a ceiling fan for me, but I don't want him building my house. It's not the same thing.
And I think that I had this experience firsthand that the IT person that I was dealing with is like, I said to them, do you understand that if your client has an issue, they're going to call you because in their untrained mind, they don't do this every day. They think, well, this is my computer person. He does it all. He does my security. And in reality, you're just giving them a firewall.
It's not. And here's the worst thing. When it comes to cyber liability insurance, as an example, the fact that you relied on your handyman IT guy to answer those questions doesn't absolve you from the responsibility. Right. So if those are answered wrong, you may have been paying for the insurance and then not be able to leverage it. You may get denied or partial denied because you falsified information and you
without knowing,
and you didn't know that you falsified it
because you have a handyman.
So there's 2 things that are happening. The insurance companies are asking more questions, right? I'll call that one form of compliance, right? For you to be able to buy this insurance, you need to go ahead and be able to answer these questions in a certain way. But there's a marketplace or a commercial compliance that's also happening. And this we've seen over the last couple of years has really started to come in strong. And what that looks like is, well, I'm a law firm, 25-person law firm. I'm giving you an example of one of my clients, 25-person law firm. And they have an opportunity to work with a company who's going to give them a lot of business. That's a client, multi-million-dollar business opportunity. And they got a 5-page questionnaire about their IT operations and practices. 3.5 of those pages was cybersecurity related questions. They gave it to us. we had to answer for them no when it should have been yes for most of these things. They were denied the opportunity to do the business with this customer. Customer said, let's try again next year. Within 1 month, another customer here in Tamarack, similar kind of a situation, multi-million-dollar business opportunity. We had just taken the customer on 3 months prior. Their IT was a shambles. They had an internal IT guy who was doing it all, and as far as they knew, was doing well because the systems were up and running, right? But answering these questions that were basically a sophisticated client who was saying, if we're going to put our business with you, we need to make sure that you have your business in order. So if you have a problem, it can be mitigated and dealt with quickly, and the questionnaire is exposing that you're going to have problems. So I was talking to an insurance underwriter about this, and I said, tell me this, what would be the key things that my clients need to focus on for you to be able to say, this is good?
Right.
She said, all of them. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? She goes, you don't understand. Insurance is being written assuming that you have all of these because that's what mid-market enterprise has been doing for years. I'm like, huh? She goes, yeah, it's not that don't look at it as we're dinging you certain amounts. I know that's what you're trying to get, which one would be a larger ding, which one would cost me more. She goes,
it's not a discount.
It's not a discount. Don't think of it that way. She goes, what we're doing is we're pushing you closer to the edge of rejecting you.
Correct. And
that's a better way to look at it. Every one of those things that you don't have, you're closer to the edge of just being rejected because we don't want your risk. Remember, the insurance companies, what you're paying them for is to take on your risk. They don't want risk that they can't control or understand. And so all they're really doing is they're outlining, here's the different risks. So what are those risks? You asked the question was, for listeners who, might be a small business here, what are the top things they should do? Number one, hands down, no questions, they should be enabling multi-factor authentication. That should be going on everything.
That's not like an upgrade anymore. That's a bare minimum.
That is a bare minimum, and that should be done on any of your cloud-based services. Your CRM, your accounting, all of them should have multi-factor turned on. Your banking, you would think it's turned on. It's not. Your Bank of America account does not force, your Wells Fargo account does not force you to turn on two-factor authentication until you do a wire transfer, and then they do 4 validations to do a single wire transfer. Why? Because the banks know there's so much wire transfer fraud, they will force it there, but they don't force it into your account. So therefore, I can come to your computer right now. I can give you a program to run. I don't need to touch it. I don't need administrative access. You run the program. I will have all of your credentials to your bank.
Wow.
Because you save them in your in your browser.
I do.
I'm not saying you,
but I do.
Most people do, right?
Right.
That's another thing.
Because it's 2,000 passwords a day.
Never save your passwords in the browser, right? But why? Oh my gosh! But Google Chrome shows me to it, and Microsoft Edge does, and Firefox. Yes. As a user, if you run a program that I give you, which is the same thing as saying you accidentally clicked on a link that you shouldn't have and you gave it to the bad guys. That's really what I'm showing you, right? I have all those passwords just like that. It takes half a second.
Wow.
Once I have your password to your Bank of America account that's got $180,000 in it because you're a business, I'll steal that money because you have no two-factor authentication on it. I'm like, so the industry is letting us down. The banks aren't enforcing it, right? Why? Because all these things become a bottleneck and a problem for their help desks. Why am I being blocked? If my 83-year-old mom can't do the bank because she's being blocked with MFA, they're saying, well, we don't want to stop our users.
The user experience, right?
Well, what's happening is now we have this push and pull. We have the marketplace that's not acting intelligently and saying let's implement MFA on everything, but then you have people who are sophisticated folks who are saying if you're going to do business with us, you have to have your house in order. And so the question is, which is it? Are you going to be on the side of saying, no, let's do business as easy as possible, make it as easy as possible? Or are you going to say, let's get our house in order? Guess what? The mid-market enterprise has, like I said, they've had their house in order in large part, and they can still be hacked. But the risk is much, much lower if you actually get your house in order.
Right, you're just playing defense.
You're playing defense
because is it going to happen? Yeah, one day.
It's going to happen.
It's just how long can you go without it, and how can you minimize the damage that the one does cause?
So when you look at what's a low cost, high return, multi-factor authentication is number one. Number two is going to be cybersecurity awareness training. And what that looks like is it's cost-wise, it's about $30 to $50 per user annually.
Wow.
It is that cheap.
Nothing.
It is nothing.
It's nothing.
Who cares?
Right.
But what you do is you get people hooked on, it could either be funny training videos or serialized dramas. I mean, this is much more sophisticated than Death by PowerPoint that we had 10 years ago.
Is that something that you do, or do you?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
It's a service that we do.
Gotcha. For your existing clients.
We do this for all of our clients.
Good.
Right? Those are two things that every single person can walk away from this podcast and go, I can implement those right now. I could do
almost for free.
Either free or cost effective.
Right.
You don't need just a checkbox PowerPoint. You want something that's actually going to engage your people on the training. But why are we doing that? Well, because you and all the employees here are your human firewalls.
Right.
If you want to look at it that way, right? You are the line of defense that we have. So all the other security controls I could put in place and all the other tools that I can buy, that's tip of the iceberg. But the one that I can't manage and can't control is you. And so the one thing we have a saying in our office is, I never trust my users.
Right.
And so I have to go ahead and create controls and safety nets to help them, because they're all going to be at different levels. So the best thing I could do for them to be able to earn their trust, to be able to gain trust in them, I guess a better way to put it, is to educate them. And that's not something that you do at a one-day seminar.
No.
You don't listen to one podcast and get educated. No. So the two things that small business owner can do today is make sure MFA is implemented. Somebody owns this responsibility. You stop and think and identify every application that we use that has client confidential data in it. And by the way, that's just addresses, names, and numbers.
Right. I think that's also
that's everything. By the way.
So it's funny because, like, we're doing this initiative. We read a lot of service contractors, and they believe, well, I run an offline business, I don't need cyber, right? And then we always throw around the Target incident that was by an HVAC company, right? That's where it came in through. And in reality, it's that people, these business owners don't realize that even their employees' information, their address, name, date of birth, social, banking, that's it. Forget about your customers. If you have 75 employees, you need it.
Yep.
It's always so outward, like, well, no, I don't collect sensitive data. I'm not a doctor's office. I'm not a hospital. I'm not, a financial institution. Yeah, but you have how much information on your own employees.
Yep.
That counts as the data that you're housing.
I was talking to a financial services company the other day. 13, 14 staff total. Small, little boutique financial services company. I would never put my money with them. One comment the young lady made was, I'm not sure I need your services, which I hear that all the time. It's perfectly fine. All of our stuff is in the cloud. Oh. It's all secured and protected. And I said, do you have multi-factor authentication enabled? No, that's something we've been talking about doing. I'm like, at this point in time, why would you be talking about it? Just do it. And if you're not doing that, how many other things are not in order?
Right.
I mean, it's shocking.
Baffling. But
most small business has never stopped to think about that.
Right. Well, as a small business owner, right, it is so, the hats that you wear are just endless.
They are. Yes.
So it's just like, it's another task on a piece of paper. And that's kind of why, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, because I don't think that a lot of business owners understand how some of the work, the two steps you just said, the MFA and just basic cybersecurity training, is so powerful. In the meantime, while you're growing, while you're putting business on the books, you can still be somewhat secure. You don't throw your hands up. I can't afford it, so I'll have an antivirus and that's it. And honestly, there's, like you said, of these, especially if you're in those areas and those niches where you're going to come and be evaluated to see if you can get a job. That is powerful and a little embarrassing, honestly.
And frankly, that's going to be happening more and more.
Yep.
And those aren't protected industries.
No.
You might say finance and
or like government contracts.
That's right.
No.
It's going to be, this is just commercial.
Yep.
If you want to do business with me, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
So here's what's coming. Here's what people need to recognize. And I'm going to suggest if they get ahead of it, they're going to be that much more ahead of their competitors.
Correct.
What's coming is that is going to be the norm. So we can't hide from this. We are better off stopping, let's say, okay, how do we reassess what we're doing here? And then how do we, over time, this could be over a period of a year and a half, how do we embrace this? And I call it a security journey. And the good news is you don't have to start with a blank piece of paper. There are security frameworks that we can follow.
I was going to ask.
Right?
I was going to ask, which one's your favorite?
So there's two that I think are that really apply. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is a government think tank, has prepared and put out NIST standards.
NIST.
So there's NIST 800 is the one that most people would look at. NIST 800, 171, and 172. And this is all geek speak and people's eyes start glazing over. They have something called the NIST CSF. It stands for Cybersecurity Framework. It's really simple.
And that one's pretty basic, right?
It is. There's about 100 and I forgot what it is. 107 controls, I think is what it is. I could have the number wrong. I apologize because I get screwed up with a couple others. There's another one that I happen to really like, which is the CIS controls, which is the CenterNet for Internet Security, another government think tank. Both frameworks are very similar. I mean, very, very similar. And the point is, you can pick a framework and say, let's just start marching through it. And what we've started to do with our clients who are interested in doing that is we'll say, okay, we'll coach you along that. You know, we'll charge you just a flat cost per month, spend an hour with you like this, one-on-one. You've got homework. We've got some homework because we'll also do some technical side where you're doing a lot of this is operational things. Right. I'll give you an example. When you say some of the stuff is easy, well, let's look at where your computer stuff is housed. Any computer stuff that you have housed besides people, if you have a server or if you have a data closet with switches and stuff, that closet needs to be locked. That's a simple thing. Is it? And a lot of small business will go, it's not. So how do you fix it? Put a deadbolt on the door. That's easy.
Right.
I mean, here's another one for you that people get shocked over. A clean desk policy. Why would I have a clean desk policy? What does that have to do with anything? Well, let me ask you this. I had this conversation with a young lady at a law firm the other day. She's the controller, so she does all the financials. And her statement was, I've worked with all the people here, 25 or so people. I've worked with them for 18 plus years. We're family here. I trust everyone. I get that. But frankly, you have no idea what my personal situation is.
Right.
And so if you're leaving sensitive financial information out on your desk, you're putting a temptation in front of me.
Right.
That I may be in a position where I've got some problems in my personal life, and that becomes a temptation. Clean desk policy number 1 removes that temptation. That's number 1. Number 2, what about the cleaning staff who comes in after hours? Like, you have a conversation, and she was like, okay, I get it. I said, that's one of 107 on this framework journey of things you have to do. Now, a clean desk policy is not something you can do technically.
Right.
It's not a cultural tool it's a cultural thing. It's a control. We set up a policy that we're going to have it. Here's how we enforce that policy. Here's how we educate on that policy. Here's how we train on that policy. And we do it. And we build a culture around it. And that's what really the cybersecurity journey ultimately is going to become. If you don't change how you think and operate, you're not going to be able to play. You're not going to be able to do business in the future. And it's going to affect everybody. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The question is that going to be a year, a decade? I'm not sure. I think it's going to be different industries.
Well, but the thing is that no matter how long that takes to catch up, it's
going to happen.
It's for sure going to happen. And it takes time to implement these changes.
Sure does.
It takes time to change the C-suite.
Yep.
A lot of that's kind of what happens just with culture in general, right? You have to get buy-in from everyone at the top for it to trickle down.
Yep.
And, there's always someone that's going to be, the controller. Well, that's never going to happen.
Doesn't apply to me.
Doesn't apply to me. No, that's never going to happen. No. Well, if everyone has to do MFA every time they have to log in, well, no, that's a misconception. That's not how that works.
Right.
Like, you don't even know how it works.
Right.
So it doesn't matter how long it's going to take for it to happen, because it's definitely going to happen, but it's going to take maybe even longer for you to change the culture in your business. So you might as well just start.
Right.
Start with the basics that you had mentioned.
I honestly think it's going to take most businesses 2 to 3 years for that to really be fully implemented. It'll take about 2 years just to go through all those different control items and work on them and to have the basics of a framework. As you're going, you're teaching your people. That's the other thing. You're doing it, and as you're going, you're teaching your people. So you're rolling this out incrementally, a little bit each month, a little bit each month.
Right.
And so by the 3rd month, you've got 3 months behind you. You're giving them something new, but you're reinforcing the first 2. And so on the 4th month, you're reinforcing 3 and giving them a new one. And you just keep on doing it. And it's just like a kid going through kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, right? They learn their numbers, they learn their letters. Pretty soon they're learning addition and subtraction. And what do you have at the end? You have a kid who actually can function in society, we're doing the same thing when reshaping a business. And doing that while the bus is going down the road is like changing the tires on a bus going down the road. It can be difficult. And people say, why am I wasting my time doing this instead of going out and getting new business? And that's how everyone in small business has been for years. I don't have time for that. It's not urgent. It's not critical. I'm saying it is shortly in the future.
Right. It's
going to be critical, and you are going to be losing out.
And even outside of losing out of potential income, potential, contracts, I think that people just, small business owners believe that this stuff doesn't happen to not Fortune 500 companies. Like, what do I have that these hackers want, right? So the cost associated with it, the cost to prevent it for the one day it does happen, it's so hard to paint that picture for them, right? All the effort, all the cost of the staff, of the training and all that stuff. But what they don't understand is that this isn't just a little wind blowing a window and this furniture is ruined. It can literally take you out of business. One.
Yes.
It is catastrophic.
Yes.
And they just don't get it because they don't think it's going to happen to them.
Let me give you a couple of examples
of
what I've seen. Okay. Roofer here in Weston. My insurance, my P&L property and casualty insurance person gave me a call and said, "Hey, could I do a forensic investigation of a hack that took place on this roofer? Small roofing company, doing projects up and down the East Coast here. His CFO lives in Colorado. President is here in Weston, doing business from home here. Bad guys got into his email and just sat there and watched."
I think people just think it's a fairy tale. Like, this doesn't really happen.
Okay. He ended up losing $150,000, and it was done very simply. They sat there and watched until it was time to go ahead and move. When the move was made, his email box, wasn't him typing it was the bad guys in his email box, instructed his CFO to go ahead and do a wire transfer to this order for materials. She did. 150 out the door.
Isn't that business email compromise?
Yep. That's what FBI has been calling business email compromise since, I think, 2016. Wow. So 6 years, and yet it's still happening today. $81,000, small 7-person personal injury law firm in Fort Lauderdale. $80,000. And I can share his story and his name because he said to me, "Dave, you've been telling me this over and over." And it went in one ear and out the other. And I kept thinking it's not going to happen to me. Same kind of a scenario. So the bad guys are in his email. They compromise his mailbox. He didn't have MFA. They compromised his mailbox. It was $81,000 that he lost. And it was all just because he had won a settlement. He was now talking with the other counsel. They intercepted and gave alternate wire instructions and gone. Over and over. I've got a friend of mine up in West Palm Beach, $2.4 million.
Oh my God.
Lost small business, right? And you kind of go, how does that even happen? How could that?
How do they survive it?
That's the bigger question. First off, if they have cyber liability insurance, there's going to be a cap on that to some degree. Sure. But that is certainly
that could alleviate.
That could be an alleviation because that's a massive hack. But yeah, it begs the question. You have a small, a 7-person personal injury firm is making maybe $1 million, $1.2 million a year, and he just lost $81K. That's right off the bottom line. It's whatever profit was going to the bottom line, gone. Plus his reputation, plus.
And the forensics behind it. He has to alert. I think that's also what people don't understand is the responsibility as a business owner that you have to the public once that breach has happened. Yeah. The cost associated with notifying every person that you have their information on. Right. The credit monitoring. That all of that stuff is so it's just you can't even put a price tag. Even the cost to just get your data back. I did a class with Carnegie Mellon and Chubb on cyber. And one of the professors there had basically described it like, okay, your front house, maybe you have a gate, right, at your driveway, right? So you have to open the gate to come in. Your front door has a lock. But just because your front door has a lock and maybe you have an alarm system, it doesn't mean you're leaving your Hermes bag and your Rolex is at the front door.
Right. The glass front door.
Exactly. So that we could just see it from the inside, right? No. Right. So it's the same thing. It's so much bigger than just, the basics because it literally can cost you, your employees, a community, an entire business for not preventing.
when I look at small business, I don't mean this cruel or rudely. I think most small business is small and stays small because we think small.
Correct. Yep. I would agree. Yep.
That's across the board.
Yeah.
So I would ask the question, here is a good question for this coming year, right? Two ways. I'm going to ask two different questions. They're both, though, anchoring on the same thing. What's holding you back from doubling your business? And I'm talking about doubling top line. I'm really talking about doubling bottom line. So what's holding you back from growing your business? Ponder that. Think about that. Here's another way to ask the question. If I gave you $1 million to spend in your business, how would you spend it? Both questions, what I'm trying to get to is what lever can you pull that would give you the maximum return on your investment? I'll give you an example. In my business, we have help desk for, reacting to people's support. I've got a whole team that's proactive services called operations. That's proactive services that are doing things to prevent you from ever calling the help desk. So probably 8 or 9 years ago, we started, we did a measurement of a key performance indicator in our business. And the key performance indicator that we came up with was how many hours per user am I spending per month? And at the time, it was 1.2 hours per user. It's just a number. It doesn't have any meaning in context, except when I looked at the best in class people, they were at 0.6. So I'm like, hold on a second. What does that mean for me? That means they're able to do twice as much work with the same number of help desk people. Help desk people are salaries and benefits and all the other stuff that goes along with that. And so I started looking at that, and then I asked the question, what lever could I pull to make my help desk team more efficient? Well, it wasn't how can they do more tickets a day or anything like that. It was how do I reduce the amount of time that they're having to spend on tickets? And so if a call came in and it took them 20 minutes to do it, could I automate something so they could push a button and solve that problem in 2 minutes? So that's part of it. Part of it is how can I operationalize and fix by standards and alignment the help desk from ever getting a call? Well, then I started thinking, that's an approach, but what benefit does that come for you as the business owner? Well, guess what? If your people aren't on the phone with IT, then what are they doing?
Selling.
They're working.
They're selling.
Right?
Yeah, they're making money.
And so what I found was we got a double, triple benefit for this. This was a massive lever to pull. So where are we at in this today? We're at 0.4 hours.
Wow.
Now that's after 6 years of hard work, and it's chipping away here, chipping away here, chipping away here. And yet, when I look at now today's best in class, I see 0.25. So I still haven't got there. So my question for this coming year is, what lever can I pull that's going to give me my maximum return on efficiency? I think all of us should be asking that. And if it's, well, if I can only hire the right people, I gave you $1 million, you got the money.
Right.
So have you defined the role? Have you figured out what it is? Our IT's holding us back. I gave you the money. Go hire. In other words, there's none of these things holding us back. And if it was holding us back, well, if I made the investment, would I get my return on the other side? That's the whole question. So whatever you're doing in life, have you stopped to consider, are you so busy in the business churning that you don't? I'm going to encourage everyone, stop, figure out the lever to churn. And in our world, what we see is IT should be one of those levers for most people today.
The thing is, it's not something that you do for yourself anymore.
No.
You have a responsibility to your customers, to your employees, and it is going to get in the way of your growth.
Yes, it is way too big.
Yep.
We just took over a small 18-person medical supplies company. They just came aboard this month. I love what the owner said. He said, I've been doing the IT for 18 years. I'm firing myself. And I was like, you have such the right. I said, are you sure you want to? Hell yes. Hopefully I can say that. Hell yes, right? I've got to fire myself. Why? He said, because I can't sleep at night because I'm worried about what I don't know. And I will tell you, there's a lot there that he has holes because he didn't know. And now, instead of knowing about them and worrying about them, he can know about them and know that it's being solved.
Right.
And that's a big difference from the handyman who we call when we know what we want done. There's a hole there, I want it patched. That's the purpose of a handyman. Right. There's a house I want to build, and I want to be able to do this, and I want to play with my kids here, and I want to have my grandkids over here. And you have a vision for something. Now, who's going to put that vision? Now you need an architect, and you need a contractor who can come in and help you realize your vision. Well, what should be happening in your relationships with the key service providers for in your industry, and I think IT for most people should be one of those key service providers, you should be able to clearly enunciate your vision, and then they should be supporting it. So my job is to come and understand your vision and support it through IT, right? Your job is to go in and understand their vision and then say, okay, here's how we should mitigate the risk. Here's the insurances that you should be considering. Every single person that you've got, your part-time CFO or your CFO, should be doing the same thing, right? If you just take a look at a larger business, right, they're going to have roles like COO, CFO, maybe a CIO or a CTO, like Chief Information or Chief Technology Officer. What are those people's roles? And they'll give you out paragraphs of here's what I do in finance and blah, blah. I'm going to distill them down to the simplest way you could ever put it.
And they shouldn't be in silos. They should be working together.
They should be, but still they do have a focused purpose. Sure. And I'm going to simplify all of those definitions with this, and it's almost fill in the blank. My job as the CFO is to understand the vision of the company and support it through finance. Operations is going to say, my job is to understand the vision of the company and support it through efficient operations. And the CIO, CTO is going to say, my job is to understand you get the picture here. Right. Chief Marketing Officer, what do we do when we're a small business? And I'm the one wearing 4 of those hats. It's the same thing, but how do we do it? And so if I'm going to say, hey, I need to give up this hat and I need to go ahead and bring in a good insurance person, I need to bring in a good IT person, I need to go ahead and bring in a good part-time CFO, that person's attitude should be, I want to understand clearly what your business is and what the vision is. You should be going in there and saying, I want to understand how your business works so I can identify where the risk is so we can have an intelligent conversation about that risk. So you could be thinking about it. When I go in, I want to understand, I look at it crassly like this. Tell me how your business operates. I'm trying to figure out how you make money, right? So if I go into a law firm and I see that they're doing an intake over here and then they process something through here and then here's how the lawyers get involved and do this, I want to understand all that because I'm looking at it going, where are they storing data?
Right.
Because I need to protect that data. And if I can protect that data, then I can help them. I mean, again, simplifying things. I like to simplify things when I think through things. In a simplistic world, our job, your job as a service provider is to help somebody make money, help them save money, and help them protect their assets. Those are the 3 things that every service provider is responsible for. If you are figuring out how to do that for your customers, you are going after customers who don't want a Walmart transaction. Right. They're going after somebody because they value your service. That's what I do. That's what you do. And hopefully that's what you do out there.
Yep. No, that's great. And I think that I agree with you as far as I think the division in between the customer that is looking for a transaction and looking for value, that the division is getting wider. And those people that are just always going to be transactional, they're weeding themselves out, right? Like they know where to go for that, right? And it's just our responsibility to attract and to, get involved with the ones that do value.
Yeah. And listen, and there's no problem with things changing. You know, when I look at the world, IT for you and I as a consumer is much easier than it was 20 years ago, right? 20 years ago, we didn't have the iPhone.
Right.
I go back 42 years. Okay, I'm an old guy, right? I started this in 1980 when I was 12. PCs failed back then because the hardware was actually bad. It was poorly made in comparison to today. Cars, the quality of cars today is actually much better than it was back then. You look at change that's going on today right now. You say the financial advisors will moan and groan about things like robo-advisors and AI coming into that stuff. I'm fine for that. Guess what? My kid is 21 years old, just got his first-time job at Florida Power & Light. He's making good bucks. And I said, save your money. And frankly, a robo-advisor is perfectly fine for you. All he needs to do is start, at this point, just start basic savings, and the robo-advisor can fit that role. It doesn't mean that he doesn't need a financial advisor at some point in life. Right now, the robo-advisor...
The stages are different.
The stages are going to be different. The robo-advisor is going to be perfectly fine. If you're a solo entrepreneur, you probably don't need me to come in and do your IT. You probably couldn't afford me. That's okay. Right. You still should be doing some of these roles, but as you realize at some point, now's the time for me to take the hat off and give it to you. I'm going to bring you in in that role, you need to have a clear picture about what should be happening. What do you want that role to do for you? You want them to understand your vision and be able to take it over. Was that just a transactional thing?
No.
If all you've been used to is transactional up till now and you haven't thought through what you really want, then all you go to the marketplace looking for is transactional. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a race to the bottom.
Right.
And that doesn't provide value in your business and usually leaves an enormous amount of risk in whatever service area that is. And folks, that's you. I mean, that's who we're talking to. You are a service provider and you're going to leave that risk on the table if you look at this as transactional. It's not.
I have a question for you as
Sure.
far as like when I'm looking to engage with service vendors and providers, right, that maybe have their hands in my data, right? What are some things like I would say, obviously, yes, I sell insurance, but how severe is it to see where the buck stops with that service provider? I have like restaurants, for example. I include a cyber liability quote with my restaurants. Someone gets into your point of sale system, you are on the hook. 100 out of 100 of them say, no, I'm not. They manage it. No, yes, you are.
You are on the hook.
You are on the hook.
Your POS company is not. Right.
They are not.
Right.
The retail person that sells stuff online, no. Stripe handle, no. You're on the hook. That's right. How can business owners be a little more educated when it comes to like engaging with these vendors that they're working with? Like, I mean, I'm positive that they're not sitting there reading all these contracts. Like, do you have any specific questions maybe that they should be asking to vet these vendors that they're going to engage with?
This goes back to one of the things I mentioned before that's changing, and that you're going to see a change over the next couple of years, much, much more, where you're seeing this commercial compliance that's required. In other words, for someone to do business with you, they're going to be asking you questions. And so all you're really asking is you're flipping that around. What questions should they be asking? Right. So you could you can cheat if you want to, get a first crib note, go pull up your cyber liability insurance questionnaire and pull some of those questions right up. Because guess what? A lot of them are really good. And they go to, most of those are tools questions. Do you have these tools in place? I would go a little bit further and to say, do you have these operational items in place? Now, for that, this is a little bit deeper question, so I'm just going to give you a guidance. When you go through that cybersecurity framework journey for yourself, you're going to see in there's an essential group. Sometimes they call these operational groups or control groups is how some of these frameworks will call it. They may have like 7 control groups, and what you do is you work on controls 1 first, and then you work on controls 2. Control 1s are the most important ones, right? By the time you get to control 7, it's maybe more esoteric stuff, but control 1 is the low-hanging fruit that everyone ought to do. Those might be 8 things. In fact, the Australians call it the essential 8 as an example, right? Look at those. Look up Australian essential 8 and look at those things and ask your vendor, do you implement these things?
That's good. Yeah.
Tell me what you do to implement these things.
Right.
Give me an explanation about what you do. Tell me your story. And if they can't, or they hem and haw, find another vendor.
Nice. There you go.
Right. And so that work has already been done for you. The Australians, I think, with their essential 8 have actually done a great job. The UK has done a great job taking the cybersecurity side and simplifying it as well. When you start going through the cybersecurity journey, you'll probably hear another acronym, because everyone in their industry loves acronyms, right?
Yeah.
And so in our industry, it's called a GRC. It's governance, risk, and compliance. And really all it is it's a system for you to track your answers, track your proof of those answers. So for example, going back to, do we have a clean desk policy? Yeah, here's a link to the policy document. Do we have the door to our computer room locked? Yep, and here's a picture of the lock, and here's a receipt of when we had it installed, and here's the type of lock. Yeah, that's all you're doing with it is you're saying, here's this governance that we need to do for risk and compliance, and here's how we're managing and doing with it and dealing with it. So most people who are going to go through a cybersecurity journey through this process are going to leverage some form of a GRC system to track this stuff and ask the questions. So they literally are going through and answering and asking questions and saying, I don't know what they want me to do here. And that's when we have a dialogue saying, okay, here's what this means and here's what we do. So if you can, as you go through that, you may find, oh, that's a good question I want to ask my vendors, then just add that. start with what your cybersecurity liability policy already has.
Oh, absolutely.
Start with the Australian Essential 8, but then add a 9th and add a 10th.
Right.
As you go through it yourself, you're going to identify what you value for your business as it relates to your specific vendors and get specific. You may have a pool of questions and you're going to ask 13 of the 25 in the pool to this particular vendor because it's tailored to them. Then you have a responsibility to ask the vendor those questions, get legitimate answers, not just I checked a box. And then you look at that every year. You ask the same questions or maybe a modified set of those questions every year, and you're checking with your vendor. Why I'm saying this is important, folks, is because if we're not prepared to answer that and do it, we're going to get passed over when our clients start asking that.
That's honestly, like, everything that you have said has been phenomenal and so true. But ultimately, anyone that's watching this, it's time to elevate your business.
Yeah, step up your game.
That's it. If you're going to be here for the long run, you're going to have to take these measures to elevate your business to be able to play in a different space. Because that's where it's going.
Step up your game now.
Because get ahead of it.
You're going to go ahead and have a couple of years to go ahead and get this ramped up. Your competitor who does nothing 2 years from now, they're going to be scrambling, looking like idiots, and business is going to be passing them by, falling into somebody's lap, and it's going to fall into the people's lap who are prepared. And those people who scramble to do something, their first thing is going to have, well, I've got some checklist stuff. Show me the meat behind it, and they won't have any meat behind it. And we all know how people are like that, right? We know how businesses are like that all the time. They say they do it, but they don't really deliver.
Right. And that's also one of the reasons why, like, I think as a person that, looks for partners and things like that, I don't necessarily re-interview them back. And I think that that's something that I can learn from this as well. I have the right to ask these questions. And if someone is $200-$300 more a month, well, there's your reason why.
Yes.
The person that can answer those questions, that Australian 8, there's a reason why they're more.
That's right.
Because they have elevated their business.
That's right.
They're not a mediocre business.
That's right.
Why would I want to do business with someone,
That's right. You don't even want to know what my cost and how they've skyrocketed internally, because we've made the decision to change how our house runs. But I'll tell you what it does. Like when that fire occurred, I call it, I asked my guys, did any of you have a sphincter tightening moment? I mean, that's what we,
That's great.
We laugh, but you know what I mean.
Right, absolutely.
Did you feel the flutters in your gut?
Yeah.
And did you feel like, oh my God,
Well, not sorry to cut you off, but I love that you care so much, because you know what? The people that come to you are trusting you to keep their doors open.
That's right.
And if you don't do your part and if you don't take your part serious, you're in the way of them making money.
I have a responsibility first and foremost,
a huge one,
to the 18 people that are my employees.
Right.
Then I have the responsibility to, everyone has a family, and most of those families are 3, 4, 5 people, right? So if you say 4 people on average, oh my gosh,
nowadays
that's 75, 80 people almost that I got to deal with there, right? And that's just my employees.
Right. And then it's all your customers.
Now I've got all my customers, right? So I got 50, 100 customers times their, number of employees and their families.
And in some of these businesses,
a lot of responsibility.
Absolutely. And in some of these businesses, it comes down to minutes.
Yes,
Every minute that they're not open, it can cost them thousands of dollars.
That's right.
So that's why that sphincter tightening thing is actually pretty true, because
it's a real thing.
It is real, because you guys are it's time sensitive, and minutes equal money.
And so, you look at that and you go, well, why didn't you have this gut reaction? Let's just call it a gut reaction so people don't wonder. This gut reaction when this fire occurred, well, because we do backup tests every day. We do human engaged backup tests monthly. We do actual full scale runs every quarter. You do what? Yes, that's what it takes to be able to be totally sure that I can get your data back just like that. Well, but these systems should just automatically be running. They should. Those are part of the checks, but you still need humans to go ahead and check it. So you still have to be efficient about how you do it. The automated systems help you be more efficient, but you still have to check. You still have to know how that you can restore it. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've gone into a small business, 5, 10, 15 person firm, and they say, well, we had all of our backups set up. Look, we took over a customer. We took over a customer 2 years ago. And they had a story where they fired their previous IT company. The new IT company came in. They'd been there for 3 months, and they got hit with ransomware. Now, I'm not saying anything about you got hit with ransomware and what could you have done to prevent that. They got hit with ransomware. What they should have had was sound backups. They didn't.
Because then you don't have to pay the ransom if you have the backup from a day ago.
You're going to be down for a day or whatever it takes for you to restore. They didn't have a good backup. Now, I'm sorry. That's blatant incompetence on the part of the IT provider.
Right.
That is 101.
Unacceptable.
That's
Absolutely.
completely unacceptable.
Yeah.
But when did the owner find out that he had this problem?
Too late.
Way too late. Do you think it affected his business?
Oh,
He's lucky to still be alive in his business, and still be operating, right? He ended up firing that provider and brought us in. Now, all it shows is the provider didn't have good operational practices. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to your question. Well, how do you find out from those people if they do? Start with the essential 8. Mm-hmm. Start with the questions that you would get off your own cyber liability policy and say, you know what? This could affect me. This would be a difference. Tell me, vendor, how you're doing this. Mm-hmm. And then you need to have a structured approach how you do those interviews with your vendors. Mm-hmm. And yeah, if they don't meet your standards, the first thing I would say is, hey, you're not up to snuff. What are you doing to change this? Mm-hmm. Well, guess what my follow-up question is going to be in 90 days?
Did you do it?
Because you should. Tell me what you've done. Because if you haven't made any movement in 90 days, I'm going to go look for another vendor. I don't need to wait a year for that.
No.
Right? That's really all this process is. The process is you're trying to awaken the awareness in them that they need to take your relationship serious.
Yep. No, I think that it's so powerful. Everything that we've discussed besides, prevention is always cheaper.
It's cheaper.
It's always cheaper. You also, there's a component of a cyber liability policy that even helps with your reputation and your PR after a loss.
That's right.
Right? Imagine how would a business owner, just that piece alone, forget the negotiating with the ransomware and the forensics of getting the data, how does your business survive a loss like that?
Right.
How do you recover your reputation that you're not just, slinging people's data around? The loss of business that comes because you lose trust.
The insurance doesn't pay for that loss of trust. The insurance, all it does is it says, because you have done this damage has occurred, you have an obligation to go ahead and have a call center, let's say, so people can call in and find out about their stuff or communicate this to people, and a PR. So you've got maybe, let's just pick a number, 100K allocated to that stuff. So you have 100K to that. But you have people who are saying, I'm not doing business with them anymore.
Yeah. The thing is that we're not Target, right? I went back to Target.
Yeah.
Right? But small businesses don't get that grace.
Right.
And people aren't just going to come back, especially when you're in an industry like attorneys, insurance, doctors, right? Where it's a trust-based.
The more trust-based issue, once you've lost that trust, you're gone.
Mm-hmm. So I know that I had learned this in the class, and I know obviously I don't need to tell you this, but maybe if you can just, as a last point here, explain it, the CIA triad, right? It's one of the things that I remembered the most from my class about how it's our responsibility to maintain the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data that we house. So outside of taking these precautions, right? Like, can you maybe just briefly explain, the difference about the three as far as, the importance of what's the difference between maintaining the confidentiality and the integrity? Because not the same, right?
So confidentiality simply is referring to you're controlling who has access. If I have a receptionist in my office, does that person, does he need to have access to my financials,
right,
where I've got maybe credit card or banking information stored?
Right.
No, they don't. No. If I've got a person who's responsible,
so it's not confidentiality with the outside; it's within the organization.
It's internal data confidentiality with your own people. It's first and foremost there. Mm-hmm. So if I've got a person who's responsible for accounts receivables, does that person need to have access to accounts payables?
Right.
If all they are,
so it's segregating permissions.
So what you're doing is you're saying, how do you have, in IT we call it the principle of least privilege.
Okay.
So how do I give you the least amount of privileges that you need to be able to do your job? Mm-hmm. Here's what we see in most small businesses, and probably everyone here is going to go, yep, that's me, is once you get through the door, once you get through the firewall, it's just wide open.
Everything is open.
Everything's available. The only thing that we may hold back would be is payroll information, and that's held over here. That's kept secure, so you don't know what I make and you make and everything else. But everything else is wide open. Why? Because I trust everybody. Why? Because we've worked together for so many years. And that's classic small business.
Right.
What this is causing you to do is saying, okay, if you're never going to work with these customers, A through P, you don't have access to them.
Why? And that's just another entry point, right? Like, why does the receptionist need to have dates of birth and socials and banking information of the employees if she's not related to payroll or the salesperson? Why? So that's also another weak access point, right? And these hackers are watching and they know that.
Yep.
they know that.
So the issue of confidentiality starts internally. Who should have access? The principle of least privilege. I can never remember what the acronym even means. The accessibility is A, right?
Right,
if I remember correctly. That should, who has access to it from a secure location is part of what that conversation is. So, for example, should I have access from my corporate-owned laptop when I take it home? Well, sure. I can see that one. Should I have access from my high school kid's computer at home? There's a whole lot more checks that I would want to do before I do that.
Right.
So am I going to make this accessible the same way, or am I going to have other checks? Now, most of that stuff is handled automatically using technology to say, hey, do you have any virus in place? Do you have, oftentimes what we'll do is we'll say, you can't have an actual copy of that Word or Excel document on your machine unless it's a managed asset from the company. You can view it in the browser,
right?
But you can't actually open it locally because the browser helps separate some of that access. You'll have to help me with what I mean.
The integrity.
Integrity. So integrity, think about it this way. If you store your data in the cloud, is it backed up? And when I say in the cloud, you store it in Microsoft Office in your OneDrive, or you store it in Google Drive. Just pick those, Dropbox. Is your data backed up? The answer is no. In fact, for anyone looking, I can give you the Microsoft because I know it off the top of my head. If you look at Microsoft's end user agreement, paragraph 6, clearly states your data is not backed up. Your data is replicated in multiple locations. What Microsoft is concerned about is the integrity of your data. So here's what that means. Microsoft will never have a problem with one of their data centers catching fire, burning up, and you've lost some data because they have it replicated at 2 other data centers. So something happens at one, too bad for that data center, but your data's over here. It may be a little slower to get to, but the integrity of your data is okay. How about if I deleted that data? Well, I deleted on all 3 data centers at the same time. What if I got malware? I corrupted all 3 at the same time. And Microsoft is saying, well, yeah, but we're giving you the integrity of your data. So if you had malware, we can't tell it's malware. We just know you wanted to write something. So we wrote it for you at all 3 locations. They maintained the integrity. From their perspective, the problem is you had lost control of integrity on your side, so it got corrupted. So what do you do in that case? You need to make sure that you have a backup of your data. You need to make sure you have systems in place so the data doesn't get corrupted, right? And so either it doesn't get corrupted to begin with, or you can reverse that corruption quickly. If not, that's where integrity is coming about. So you've got all that, and that's really what you're looking at is how am I being responsible with my data, with my systems, with what we're doing. That's really all
so complex.
That's all the triad's talking about. And that's the thing, right? How much do you spend your time thinking about that?
Right. No.
Not
Never,
at all.
Ever. I mean,
at a conference, during the hour of the conference, the 45-minute presentation of the conference, you thought about it.
Right.
Our job is to think about that all the time. Right. What is your job? To think about insurance all the time, right? So that's it. That's what happens. That's why everyone hires a service provider to do an aspect. When they elevate to that position, they realize the value of the service provider is because that person is thinking about this all the time for me. A good service provider is doing that. Right. A good insurance person is going to give me a call and say, hey, I think you should look at this product because I think this could be better for where you are in your state of life with your kids. For a life insurance product, I think this could be better. Was I thinking about that? No, but when I got a call from my guy, when he did that, I was like, sold for life.
Right.
I'm not going anywhere else. Who else is going to think about me?
Because you're not a transaction. He's thinking about you on when you didn't even, you think he's playing golf.
Yes. And he could have been.
It
doesn't really matter. He gave me a call and said, I was thinking about you and I think you should look at this. I think this makes sense. I'm like, holy, this is what I want. That's like the most valuable employee I could ever have is somebody who's thinking, how can we make this business better?
Right. Listen, I appreciate your time so much. I can keep going for hours. Like, this is so fascinating to me. And I think it's something that, unfortunately, and I know what it's like to be a small business owner. And I opened 5 months before COVID. So I know the struggles of being, a new business owner. But this stuff is so important. It's so important. And I love your perspective on if you're serious about your business, mold it serious from when you start. As much as you possibly can to be able to play with the big guys.
And when
that time comes.
And that's true all the time.
Yep.
I don't care if you've been in business for 20 years,
Yeah.
or we've been in business 45 years
Right.
at this point, right? And we are constantly, every year, we're stopping to say, how do we
Right.
rethink? What can we do to move ourselves forward?
Yeah.
And that's how you need to be thinking.
I love that so much. Thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Tell everybody how they can reach you if they
So
need to.
easily found, www.connections.com. Connections.com is our website. People would say, my gosh, that's a cool name. Yeah, that's what happens when you register websites in 1994.
Before the internet.
Pretty much before the internet. www.connections.com. We'd love to chat with you. Listen, if we can't help you, we're still going to help you because we're going to give you some advice to let you know what to do. So feel free to give us a call. You can reach me directly at my phone number is 954-920-9604. That's our main number. 511 is my extension. So 954-920-9604, extension 511. Would love to chat with you. Thanks.
I appreciate you so much, and you're definitely coming back.
Awesome.
We're gonna do. I have so many other questions about.
Well, then we'll spend some time in the future doing that.
There's definitely gonna be a part 2. Thanks so much.
You got it. Good to see you all.
Likewise.